What is the sound of a warrior's spirit? Is it the roar of a battle cry, the deafening crack of a rifle? Or is it something quieter, something you could walk right past on a rainy street and never even notice? What happens when a system designed to protect decides you are the threat? And what happens when that system comes face to face with a power it cannot possibly comprehend? Tonight's story is about that quiet strength, and the storm that erupts when it's pushed too far. The rain in Port Sterling doesn't just fall, it has a weight to it, a cold, persistent presence that seeps through the cracks of the city and into the bones of the forgotten. Under the flickering yellow light of a derelict bus stop on the industrial edge of town, where the city's pulse fades to a whisper, sat Sergeant Alani Reed. Or who used to be Sergeant Reed. Tonight she was just Lonnie, a ghost invisible to the trucks hissing by on the wet asphalt. In her arms, wrapped in every dry layer she owned, was her 4-month-old son, Kai. His small warmth was the only thing standing between her and the encroaching chill. To any car that passed, they were a sad, familiar silhouette. Another tragedy, another statistic in the making. A common mistake in judgment society makes every single day. They couldn't see the hypervigilance in her eyes, a leftover from a world away. She wasn't just watching the rain, she was tracking the reflection of headlights in the puddles, calculating the speed of passing vehicles, her senses tuned to a frequency of survival that civilian life had never managed to silence. This wasn't supposed to be her life. The promises made to her in a recruitment office, the medals she earned under the searing Kandahar sun, the loyalty she'd given her country, all of it had dissolved into a stack of lost paperwork in an underfunded VA office. Her fall wasn't a dramatic crash. It was a slow, quiet erosion. The kind of systemic failure that doesn't make the headlines but leaves its heroes sleeping in bus stops. She was one of the thousands of female veterans for whom the loudest battles are not fought overseas, but in the silent, lonely war for a place to call home after the uniform comes off. That's when she saw it. A Port Sterling police cruiser. It didn't just drive by, it prowled. It passed their lonely shelter, once its headlights cutting a sterile white line across her worn-out boots. Then a minute later, it passed again, slower this time. Alani's training buried but not gone surfaced like a reflex. She clocked the car's model, noted the predatory crawl the way it hugged the curb. This wasn't a patrol. This was a hunt. The cruiser pulled up its engine, a low growl that seemed to vibrate in her chest. 2 officers emerged, their heavy boots splashing in the puddles. One was young, his face a mask of nervous aggression. Alani had seen boys like him before, eager to prove themselves. The other was older, thicker, with a tired cynicism in his eyes that was somehow far more dangerous. "Evening," the older one. Thorne said, his voice dripping with false authority. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't ask if she needed help. His eyes scanned her, lingered on the bundle in her arms, and settled on a judgment he'd made before he ever got out of the car. "You can't be loitering here." Alani remained perfectly still, her body a shield for her son. She knew the rules of this engagement. Stay calm, be small, don't provoke. "Just waiting for the rain to let up, officer," she said, her voice even betraying none of the storm raging inside her. The younger one, Davies, shone his flashlight in her face, making her flinch. "What's in the bundle?" he demanded. The question was so absurd, so insulting, it almost broke her composure. But before she could answer, a tiny plastic rattle, a cheap gift from a shelter volunteer, slipped from the folds of Kai's blanket and clattered onto the wet concrete. The sound, no louder than a whisper, changed everything. Officer Thorne's hand immediately went to his belt. What was that? "Drop it, show me your hands." It was a rattle, a child's toy. But in their eyes she saw the narrative they were writing. Homeless, unstable, dangerous. And in that moment, Alani knew her invisibility had just ended. She had become a target. Thorne looked back at the cruiser, a cruel smile touching his lips as he gave a sharp nod to the back seat. He wasn't just going to move her along, he was going to make an example of her. He was about to unleash a storm, completely unaware that he was standing in the path of a hurricane. Arrogance is a dangerous drug, and Officer Thorne was high on his own authority. He saw the plastic rattle not as a toy, but as defiance. He saw Alani's stillness not as control, but as a challenge. With a sharp, angry whistle, he pulled a latch on the side of the cruiser. The door to the K9 unit swung open. A blur of black and tan muscle erupted from the car. This was Stryker, a Belgian Malinois bred and trained for one purpose: overwhelming force. Steam plumed from its snarling jaws, its eyes locked onto Alani, its body coiled like a spring. To the officers, this was procedure. To Alani, it was a declaration of war. As Stryker charged, the sound of its claws scrabbling on the wet pavement seemed to warp time itself. The cold Port Sterling rain on her face suddenly felt like the blistering heat of the sun. The scent of wet asphalt was replaced by the smell of dust and sun-baked earth. The growl of the Malinois faded, replaced by a different sound, the happy panting breath of the best partner she had ever known. We are no longer in Washington. We are in a narrow, dusty alley in Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. The sun is a merciless hammer in the sky. A younger Sergeant, Alani Reed, is on point, her focus absolute. Beside her, trotting with a calm confidence that belied the danger, is Sully, a handsome yellow Labrador. Sully wasn't bred for aggression. He was a four-legged surgeon trained for the delicate life-or-death work of sniffing out explosives. And Alani and Sully were more than handler and dog. They were one mind and two bodies. This was it, a high-stakes mission. A suspected IED factory was nearby, and this alley was the only approach. 10 soldiers were behind her, their lives depending on what Sully's nose told him in the next 3 minutes. She watched his every twitch. The soft flap of his ears, the subtle shift in his tail, a language only she could understand. He worked the ground, methodical, focused. Then he stopped. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He gave his signal a sudden motionless sit. He looked back at Alani, his soft brown eyes meeting hers. There was no fear in them, only trust. "It's here," his look said. "I found it for you. Now keep us safe." Following his lead, she located the nearly invisible tripwire, saving all 10 lives from an ending written in fire and shrapnel. In a world of chaos and clear-cut enemies, her bond with Sully was the one absolute truth. It was a partnership built not on dominance, but on deep mutual respect. Snap. The sound of Stryker's jaws snapping just a few feet away pulls her back to the rain-slicked reality of the bus stop. Her heart isn't pounding with fear. It's pounding with a cold, familiar focus. She looks at this charging Malinois, and she doesn't see a monster. She sees a magnificent, intelligent animal being misused. She sees its tense posture, the slight uncertainty in its eyes. This dog is trained for aggression, yes, but it is also trained to respond to authority. And the panicked, angry yelling from Officer Thorne is not the frequency of a true leader. But Thorne can't see this. He sees his $100,000 canine weapon hesitating. For him, it's a personal insult. "What's wrong with this mutt?" He spits, his face red with fury. He misreads the situation completely, making the most common mistake of a bully. When intimidation fails, you don't reassess, you double down. "Davies, let's give him some backup." Thorne barks. "Open the other doors. Let's see how she likes all 3 of them." The young officer, caught up in the moment, scrambles to obey. 2 more cage doors swing open. 2 more sleek, powerful Malinois leap out, their growls joining Stryker's, a symphony of engineered menace. They fan out, flanking Stryker, their teeth bared, their eyes glowing in the flashing lights. The scene is a nightmare. A lone woman clutching her baby, surrounded by 3 elite police dogs ready to attack. The officers stand back, confident they have finally broken her. They believe they have created a situation with no escape. What they've actually done is assemble a reunion. They just brought the sergeant back to her squad. For a normal person, this would be the end. A moment of pure, primal terror. But in the face of 3 snarling predators, Alani didn't see the end. She saw the beginning. She saw the familiar geometry of a threat assessment. The fear that had been a cold knot in her stomach didn't vanish. It crystallized. It transformed into a diamond-hard stillness that settled over her like a shroud. Her breathing, once shallow with anxiety, became slow, deep, and deliberate. Her shoulders, which had been hunched against the cold, squared off. The mother disappeared. Sergeant Reed took her place. The world narrowed to the three dogs. The officers, their frantic yelling, the flashing lights, it was all just noise. Stryker, the lead dog, was only 6 feet away, ready to launch. He was the key. Alani's eyes met his, but her gaze was calm, not challenging. And then she moved. It wasn't a big movement. It was a slight, almost imperceptible shift of her free hand, a gesture so small the officers didn't even register it. But Stryker did. It was a signal she had used with Sully 1,000 times in the dust of Kandahar. It meant one thing: hold. Assess the field. The dog, mid-snarl, faltered. A flicker of confusion crossed its intelligent eyes. It was expecting screams, fear, retreat. It was not expecting a command from its target. Chaos was Officer Thorne's weapon of choice. His voice was a torrent of angry commands. Get her, watch her, get her! He was trying to fuel the dog's aggression, but all he was creating was sonic confusion. And through that wall of panicked noise, Alani cut through. She didn't shout. Her voice was low, sharp, and resonant, a sound that vibrated with absolute authority. It was a single word in a language the officers didn't speak, but their dogs understood perfectly. Platz. The German command for down struck the air like a thunderclap. To a dog like Stryker, the world is a hierarchy of sound. The officers' yelling was just high-pitched, frantic energy, the sound of pack members in distress, not a leader in control. But Alani's voice was different. It was the sound of certainty, the sound of command. It was a language hardwired into his very being, a foundational command learned before all others. It was the voice of the alpha. Instantly, Stryker's aggression vanished, replaced by pure instinct. He dropped to the ground, his belly hitting the wet pavement with a splash. The other two dogs, seeing their leader submit, immediately followed suit. One moment they were a snarling wave of death. The next they were 3 disciplined soldiers lying obediently at the feet of the woman they were sent to attack. The officers stood frozen, their mouths hanging open in stunned silence. The rain was the only sound. Thorne stared, unable to process what he was seeing. But the true twist, the real shattering of his reality, was yet to come. Alani waited a beat, letting the silence stretch. Then she gave another command, this one softer, calmer. She didn't turn their weapons off. She aimed them. Slowly the 3 dogs rose, but they didn't return to the officers. Instead, in a display of breathtaking intelligence and loyalty, they repositioned themselves. Stryker came to her left, another to her right, and the third stood slightly in front, forming a perfect protective semicircle around Alani and her sleeping son. They were no longer facing her. They were facing the police. She hadn't just disarmed the threat. She had captured it. She had turned their own partners, their most powerful weapons, into her personal honor guard. The balance of power hadn't just shifted. It had been utterly and completely shattered. And the officers were now on the wrong side of it. There is a unique kind of silence that follows an event the mind cannot comprehend. It's a silence filled with the noise of a breaking reality. Officer Davies stood paralyzed, his face a pale, slack-jawed mask of disbelief. He was just a kid, really playing a part he didn't truly understand, and the script had just been set on fire. But for his senior partner, Officer Thorne, it was something far worse. This wasn't just shock. This was an ego death. Everything he was, his authority, his experience, his power, had been dismantled in front of his eyes by the very person he had deemed worthless. And that humiliation quickly curdled into a hot, blinding rage. His world had been turned upside down, and in his desperation to set it right, he reached for the last symbol of power he had left. His hand dropped to his hip, his fingers closing around the cold grip of his service pistol. A foolish, desperate move. He never even cleared the holster. Before his fingers could tighten, Stryker, the very dog he had unleashed, let out a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from the center of the earth. The dog's head lowered, its eyes locked onto Thorne's hand. It was an unmistakable warning. The line had been drawn. The dogs had chosen their alpha, and Officer Thorne was now officially marked as the threat. He froze, his hand hovering over his weapon, completely and utterly neutered. Seeing this, Alani didn't gloat. She didn't press her advantage. A true leader doesn't need to. She simply demonstrated control. She spoke a few soft, soothing words in German to the dogs, and the tension immediately bled out of them. Their growls subsided, but they held their protective positions, their bodies relaxed, but ready. She had shown the officers that their aggression was the problem, and her calm was the solution. Then she did something brilliant. She lifted her gaze from the dogs and looked past the officers directly into the small, blinking red light on Officer Thorne's body camera. She knew this moment was being recorded. She was no longer going to be an invisible, anonymous victim. She was going to write herself into the official record. Her voice when she spoke was not the voice of a homeless woman. It was the voice of a soldier reporting for duty. It was chillingly clear, calm, and stripped of all emotion. "For the record," she said, her eyes boring into the lens, "my name is Sergeant Alani Reed, United States Air Force, serial number 225 Delta 884. I am unarmed, and I am protecting my infant son. Any further escalation will be treated as a direct assault on a U.S. veteran." Checkmate. She had just transformed their greatest weapon, the official report, into her own. The narrative was no longer hers to survive, it was theirs to answer for. With that she turned. She didn't run, she walked. Her back straight, her pace measured and dignified, she moved away from the scene of her victory. And the dogs, without a single command, held their ground. They stood as silent sentinels, a living wall between her and the two men watching her, until she and Kai were safely down the block. Only then did they relax, turning back to their handlers with a look of profound canine confusion. The lesson from that rain-soaked street is one that echoes through time. Power that comes from a badge, a uniform, or a weapon is conditional. It can be taken, defied, or rendered meaningless. But power that is earned, forged in experience, sharpened by discipline, and rooted in courage, that power is absolute. Alani Reed had walked into that confrontation as a ghost. She walked out of it as a queen, leaving two broken men standing in the rain, forced to confront the wreckage of their own arrogance. Alani Reed disappeared into the gray, pre-dawn drizzle of Port Sterling, her son held tight against her heart. She hadn't just won a confrontation. She had reclaimed her own story. She walked away from the flashing lights, from the shattered arrogance of two officers, and from the ghost of the victim they had tried to make her. She walked towards the horizon, a solitary figure of immense strength, her footsteps echoing a truth the world too often forgets. And an encounter that profound doesn't just end when someone walks away, it leaves an echo. Weeks later, a small article buried deep in the Port Sterling local news would mention two police officers being placed on indefinite administrative leave, pending an internal investigation into a procedural anomaly captured on body cam footage. The official story would be sanitized, scrubbed of its magic and its terror. But the truth would ripple through the department, a whispered legend about the night a homeless woman commanded the loyalty of their most elite K-9 unit. Justice in this world is rarely a lightning strike. More often it is a quiet tide pulling the unworthy back out to sea. And what of the dogs? It's crucial to understand that they didn't betray their handlers. They simply obeyed a higher law. The loyalty of a highly trained working dog is not to a uniform or a name, but to a state of being. They are experts in energy and intention. They can smell fear, they can sense chaos, and they instinctively recognize the calm, steady hand of a true leader. In that moment, they didn't see an officer and a civilian. They saw a pack in chaos and a true alpha who brought order. Their actions were the ultimate testament to the profound intelligence of animals and their allegiance to a strength that has nothing to do with force. But in the end, this story isn't just about a soldier or a set of dogs. It's about the quiet warriors we walk past every day. The single mother at the grocery store, the elderly man on the park bench, the immigrant dishwasher working a double shift. We have no idea what deserts they have crossed, what battles they have fought, or what incredible power they hold in reserve. The story of Alani Reed is a powerful reminder that the most formidable people are often the ones who have learned to be invisible to survive. That a person's worth is not measured by their circumstances, but by their spirit. And that strength isn't about how loudly you can roar. It's about having a voice that even in a whisper can command the storm to be still. So the next time you find yourself on a rainy street, I want you to think about this. Who are the quiet warriors you walk past every day, and what unseen strength do they carry within them? If this story moved you, and if you believe that sometimes the most incredible truths are hidden just beneath the surface of our everyday lives, then you have found the right channel. We are dedicated to finding and sharing these stories of hidden courage, unexpected heroes, and the quiet strength that changes the world. To make sure you don't miss the next journey we take, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button, and be sure to click the notification bell. It tells YouTube you want to hear more stories that matter. And most importantly, it ensures you're the first to know when we release our next video, because the story we have for you next week is one you will not want to miss. Thank you for listening.